All right, howdy everyone.
Howdy.
I'm back with Mason. Yeah, there he is. Back with Mason. We're gonna cover essentially what I covered in the previous two vaccine mandate videos, except we're going to make it a discussion because I know that Mason has ideas and perspectives that I don't necessarily have. So very briefly, I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
he actually thought to include me this time, which was very kind of
All right,
him.
you know what?
Last
I
time he didn't even
tried.
ask,
Okay,
so
okay. I tried to include him last time. You know what? I'm not even gonna. I'm not
did
even
you?
explaining myself. I'm not even explaining myself. I'm just telling. We're just gonna. I'm gonna speed run through what I covered last time, and then we're going to discuss it. So basically, last time I started by describing the situation with federal vaccine mandates for federal employees and employees of federal contractors, which turns out to be an entirely ridiculous number of people given how many companies and how big the companies are that contract for the federal government.
Hmm.
Covered the actual requirement, the documentation of the requirement, and it's actually not an executive order. An executive order directed a task force to create guidance, the results of which included requirements. The guidance that the task force released, anyhow. And then essentially tied that in with the Nuremberg Code because the Nuremberg Code being an extremely boilerplate, almost insultingly simple and implicit enumeration of medical ethics, outlaws any medical experimentation or research that does not ha- does as a prerequisite does not have the absolute and voluntary and informed consent of the human subjects, which is not the case if you're threatening the livelihood of the human subjects, because you could very easily argue that threatening someone's livelihood puts them under duress, or as a form of coercion. And to back that up, I not only appealed to anyone's functioning moral compass, but also to the existing legal system, and especially the Me Too movement. Because the Me Too movement, of course, essentially involved a bunch of sexual favors that were asked for in a context that was coercive. So most of the Me
Yeah.
Too victims were not. I mean, there was some form of consent, some invalid, but nevertheless verbally articulated consent that was extended. That, but it,
Consent under duress, which can
exactly
be argued not to be consent at all.
not could be argued is
Again,
not. It
yeah.
absolutely is not. So yeah, but it was less. I mean, admittedly, the kinds of things that happened or that were revealed as a result of the Me Too movement are most of them more egregious than forcing someone to take a vaccine, at least by many standards. But it is nevertheless the same ethical violation. It is the
Hmm.
same principle that is violated, and it is being violated much more explicitly now. Maybe less egregiously, but much more explicitly because the Me Too violations were mostly implicit. This is literally just in executive orders in plain text. And then we
Sure.
talked about the difference between the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine and the Comirnaty vaccine, and the fact that they are legally distinct, and the misinformation surrounding that as a part of the informed component of informed consent. So we talked about a number of defects of information concerning FDA approval, safety, effectiveness, and medical, shall we say, the state of the medical community with respect to their collective opinion on vaccinating, especially young people. Because many people will tell you that the medical community is settled on the matter, and that is a lie. And it's those kind of lies and lies concerning FDA approval of vaccines, et cetera, which are not explicit defects in consent in the same way as the Nuremberg Code violations are, but certainly do lead people to get vaccinated who would not otherwise be vaccinated. And to the extent that that's the case, the people who are lying about the safety and effectiveness of these vaccines are responsible. So, that's a 5-minute summary of 40 minutes of discussion. You can go and find the rest of it on our YouTube channel or SoundCloud channel. What say you, Mason?
Well, as a side note, um, you said the word misinformation, one or two times in there, and I just like hate that word now.
Same.
Just has so much dog shit piled on top of it. Just really hate that phrase because it just gets misused a lot, which is kind of ironic considering it's the name of the phrase is misinformation. But besides that, yeah, the Nuremberg Code stuff you brought up was kind of interesting because I think we've kind of talked about this before, but we never like brought it into the context of the Nuremberg Code, and it's an interesting argument to say that um, because these people are not 100% informed on what they're putting into their body, and they're being pressured into getting the vaccine by the government, which is mandating all these companies with 100 plus people to get the vaccine. Um, there's a strong case to be made that violates the Nuremberg Code and violates a lot of ethics in medicine. You know, if you're not if you're not properly the way consent typically works in like a general sense is you have to be um, knowledgeable on what something might entail in order to consent to it. So, for instance, if let's say you, mm,
Consent to be part of a
say,
clinical trial and you're not told about the parameters of the research being done?
yeah, that's a good. The problem is that I feel like there's been clinical trials that don't exactly tell you what the parameters are. They usually tell you what they're going to do to you, but they don't tell you why they're doing it, because usually that's left vague so that well, it depends on what kind of clinical trials you're talking about. Because I'm actually kind of my mind was for some reason gravitating towards what experiments is it where they had people shock other humans and they had like
Yeah,
the person in the lab coat standing next to them telling them to
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
Do you know what that one was called?
I don't know. I think it was a university that was
Hmm.
responsible for that study. It's a good study, actually.
That
It's
would
not a horrifically unethical study. Essentially they had a person with a dial and a button in front of them, and the dial had voltage settings, and the button would shock somebody on the other side of some veil. And there was a
Mhm.
person with a lab coat standing next to the person sitting in front of the dial and the button, and the lab coat person was telling them to increase the voltage until it was at a lethal level. And it wasn't like a technicality thing. You had to know what lethal voltage. No, it was clear to the test subject, the person sitting in front of the dial on the button and turning up the voltage and pressing the button and shocking this person on the other side of this veil. And they could hear him, yelping every time they pressed it. They were told that the last shock that they're going to administer after 10 or so, or however many it was going to be lethal. And I think it was 60% of people did it. Now, it wasn't an actual
Yeah.
person, by the way. Another worthwhile point is that it was an actor on the other side of the veil pretending to
Hmm.
be shocked. But nevertheless, 60% of people believed that they were killing someone, but did it because a person in a lab coat told them to.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what my mind went to when you said clinical trial, but that's not like a clinical trial. I'm not sure why my mind went to that, but that would be a situation where you're told what you're doing, but you're not told any context on why you're doing it. So they're told they're going to shock someone, because they
Right.
probably signed some type of form saying they consent to it. They consent to this experiment being done on them, but they don't exactly know. So I guess I'm trying to make a distinction between parameters and um, other things, but I guess that doesn't have much relevance in the case of clinical trials and medical um, experimentation, because that's not really usually a thing aside from like control groups, I guess.
Yeah, it frequently is the case that the test subjects cannot know what they're. Another good example is there's a study that they did on a bunch of college kids where they gave one group multiple choice tests that had a lot of questions and answers concerning death
Mm,
and old age and dying. And then they had another group that had a multiple choice test, and all of the questions and answers were about life, things that are thriving and young and healthy. And
mm.
what they were measuring, they completely threw away the answers. They were not interested in the results of the test at all. They were just getting their mindset in a particular environment. I mean, not an environment, but a particular. They had them think about either up, youth
Dead or
and
alive,
life
yeah.
or old age and death. And what they were measuring was the speed at which they walked back to the elevators out of the room.
That's fascinating.
And as you might,
You know what they found?
yeah, the people who took the depressing test walked back way slower,
Mm.
which is just crazy. It's like so cool because it illustrates how much your like what's going on in your mind affects just the way you operate your day.
It's fucking wild that they just threw out the answers to the questions, because that alone could have been interesting.
They
But they're
might
just
not
like,
have
nah,
thrown him
don't really
out.
care about that. We're gonna talk about the elevator, which is wild to me.
I mean, I don't know
It's
what they
very wild. It's
did,
a
but
very fascinating study.
yeah, you'd think if you're taking this thing that somehow or other these answers are relevant to whatever the
Mm,
test is. I don't know that they saved them. They might have. I didn't read the study. I just heard about it. But
mm.
yeah, I don't think that they. I mean, it
They
would.
frequently they frequently do that. They tell you the test about one thing when really they're testing another.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you they're testing. For instance, with the shock one, they tell you they're testing probably. I don't know, what did they tell them they were testing?
I have
I
no
actually don't
idea what
know.
the justification. I don't know. They gave a justification. I think that was kind of part of it.
Kind of wild.
It's a really terrifying study.
It
But
is a terrifying study.
if
But
you,
that one, I think the point I was trying to make is that one actually clearly ethical? Because if you think you killed someone, that's kind of insane. Obviously, they probably told them afterwards that they didn't actually kill someone, but
yeah, I might have. I assume
that could
so.
be scarring, hearing someone like scream, a blood-curdling scream as if they're dying, and knowing that you're the one that pressed the button, you know?
It solidifies that
That gives me,
like it's easy to read the history of atrocities and think those are other creatures that committed those, and it's like no, they were humans, and you're one of them. So
mhm.
that wiring is in you. And in case you thought it wasn't, the Stanford prison study and that study clearly established that it's totally there. And the fact that you think that it isn't just means it's dormant and just waiting for someone to, you know, run some current through it. So
Yeah.
better for you to recognize it's there and destroy it or suppress it than to pretend it's not there because some little toothbrush mustache motherfucker is going to bring it to life.
Yeah. But I guess tying it back to the vaccines, because you kind of got off topic a bit there.
Not
Yeah, you
much.
need not much, yeah, fair enough. But the the thing we're missing here, so the phrase usually is informed consent,
Right.
and it's phrased that way for a reason. And so if you don't have the informed part of informed consent, then you can't have the consent part as well. Is
Right.
generally how that goes. So, yeah, I would say I agree with the notion that you can't leave out all this critical information, such as, I mean, it's just there are just some crazy stats on. You could even argue. So you know that one stat, it's like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's one stat that went around a few months ago, maybe even last year, but they basically asked different groups of people based on their political leaning, as different groups of people, um, what they thought the hospitalization rate of
Yeah.
COVID was, and
Yeah.
then what they thought what, I guess the death rate of COVID was.
Yeah.
Um, and you saw among Democrats, but and even Republicans, a lot of people severely, severely overestimated how much, how many people were being hospitalized by COVID. And it was like, God, I want to say something like 40% of Democrats thought there was a 50-50 chance of being hospitalized by COVID. I want to say that's what the statistic was. Does that seem close to accurate, or am I just way off? You remember that one? In any case, it was some
Yeah, I
astounding
remember it.
number like that.
I'm trying to
It was
find
some
it.
astounding, yeah. It was like I remember 50% being somewhere in there. Anyways, it was some astounding number, and when you actually get down to the actual numbers, the risk is more like the risk of dying from COVID. Not even talking about hospitalization, but just dying from COVID. Um, is like point oh something percent, like 0.03% or something like that. It's ridiculously low um, for the kind of for the way we talk about it. We talk about it like it's like a 1% or 2% death rate, and it's like no, it's less than 1%. Hell, some people talk about it like it's a 10% death rate or something like that. But yeah, this is the way people are being misled about COVID. You could argue that that's um, not
Defects
informed.
of,
It's not.
yeah, right.
Yeah, it's not informed consent. They're so misinformed about COVID that they don't actually know what the risks are of getting COVID. And if they don't know what the risks are of getting COVID, they think, okay, well, anything's better than a 10% chance of dying, and so they take the vaccine, not even concerning themselves with possible risk with the vaccine. And then, you know, hopefully the vaccine doesn't have any side effects for them, but it has had side effects for other people. It might have future side effects that we don't even know about. Who knows? I don't know. Parker doesn't know. Your doctor probably doesn't know either. Maybe. Um, yeah, it's I would say that's a great instance of what the Nuremberg Code talks about of not having informed consent.
Right.
If you don't know the risks involved with each, um, you have two options. You have option A, risk getting COVID, and option B, take the vaccine. If you don't know the risks of both associated with both, if you don't know the specific numbers, you're not informed. That's not informed consent. Um, and that gets to
Especially
be a
not
problem
if
when
you
you start
have
talking.
been given a very skewed representation of those numbers by
Mhm.
your news media.
Yeah, news media and our
Yeah, and
politicians.
health
But
officials and politicians.
this is I mean, this is a problem on its own, but I think where you were probably going with this when you talked about it was this in combination with the vaccine mandate is a very scary combination because you're essentially not only scaring people from a health perspective and saying you have a very increased risk of dying from this if you don't get the vaccine, you're scaring them from a livelihood perspective, saying you don't get to work if you're not vaccinated.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's very very dangerous kind of mindset to slip into, and it's very easy. Um, I think for a lot of people to defend this because they look at more of
They think, well, how are we going to
one of the
end the pandemic? That's what I usually
mhm,
hear. How are we going to end it? If we don't get everyone vaccinated, we have to get everyone vaccinated, or this is just going to go on forever. And it's like, oh, you're trying to end the pandemic. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a mission. To hell with the Nuremberg Code, then, though, right? Because you have something to accomplish.
one of the craziest things to me, and this is a slightly off topic, but not really, um, because we talk about it quite frequently, especially with the relation to the vaccine,
Right.
Australia.
Oh Lord.
Um,
Oh boy.
this
Sheesh.
it doesn't it doesn't register to me sometimes how easy it is to slip into authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Um, but Australia, has for a long time been considered part of the West, quote unquote, the West.
Nah,
It's the U.S., part of
nah.
Europe, parts of Europe, and then Australia, basically. There's other countries that I'm leaving out, but those are like the main ones you would think about. Canada too, I guess. Um,
Barely.
yeah, they were considered part of the West, but I mean, this day and age, they literally have more in common with China than they do the U.S.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. So it's like I've started calling it the West's China. But anyways,
absolutely.
the point I have in bringing them up is that they there's a lot of people that make excuses for this, and I actually saw a post about it today that I can read now. It was just fascinating to me because I'm in the mindset. I'm an American. I live in America, specifically Texas, and so like probably one of the most free places on earth. And so I kind of take that for granted sometimes. I don't think about like how easy it is for this kind of shit to happen, and how easy it is for people to make excuses for this. But then I read about what's happening in Australia. I'm like, damn, their police are really taking this to the next level. They're just arresting citizens for Facebook posts they made 3 months ago, stuff like that. I'm like,
Right.
surely the Australian public is pissed off, and some of them are.
Some of them,
But if you
yes.
read
Yeah.
online, a lot of them aren't. They're happy with this kind of stuff. And so, like, I saw a post today, and so here it is. He said, you would think, and this was on Reddit. He said, you would think that Australia is some sort of dystopian hellscape, when the truth is that we recently hit 70% in our largest state by population, and we'll hit 80% vax in what, a week or so. The state is basically going to be back to pre-pandemic life on December 1st, minus, say, masks on trains, which people have been doing for at least as long as I can remember, anyways. Oh, and the quote freedoms, end quote, we gave up. Country of 26 million people. As of today, 130,000 cases, 1,448 deaths. No, but keep telling us how much more free America is. No, no, you're definitely free. Free to bury your parents and loved ones. Morons.
Good
I see stuff
God.
like that. I see stuff like that, and I'm like, just how do you get to a point where if you don't know much about the Australian side of the pandemic, basically all you need to know is right now, any Australians cannot go more than 5 kilometers from their own house for really any reason. They can go outside for like an hour a day, but I think even within that hour, they have to stay within 5 kilometers of their house. Um, which for all you Americans here, and we're probably mostly Americans, what's 5 kilometers to miles?
It's gonna be a
Three
few
miles,
miles. Yeah.
basically 3 miles. Imagine having to stay within 3 miles of your home every single day, weeks on end, months on end. You don't have an end date in sight because they haven't given you one. And just imagine what living like that would be like, you know? Um, that's the kind of conditions in Australia, and people accept that, and they not only accept that, they appreciate it, they praise it. Um, and even have people in America that think this is a good solution, that think we should do more of stuff like this, and think Biden should push things further, that he's not pushing things enough, you know. So it's just kind of crazy to me, how easy it is for people to start making excuses for this kind of thing. You
It's the
you would
default
most
setting.
rational Yeah, I feel like most rational people would see this kind of stuff and say, wow, that's kind of insane. Staying 3 miles, staying in a 3 mile radius
Mm.
for months on end has to drive you insane or
Not
go
when you have
crazy,
a not when you have a deeply propagandized population, which is
Yeah.
what Australia is. They've had their health ministers screaming at the top of their lungs for months now,
hmm
like chickens with their heads cut off,
hmm
talking about the threat of this and now we got to do. And I got to tell you something. If look, for almost all of human history, we have had the rule of man rather than the rule of law. And the result of that, well, the excuse for that is that the king was going to keep you safe. And it didn't matter if you weren't free because you were safe. The West was founded by the idea that, on the idea that security is not worth purchasing at the price of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't believe that, go to the East or just don't vote. Because I'm not saying we should prevent you from voting because, and get this, I think you should be free. But you just simply cannot have a population that is more concerned with security from their government than they're concerned about keeping their government in its little pen where it belongs and not end up with 5-kilometer radius mandates and $5,000 fines for not getting vaccinated. Which, yeah, there's an Australian province that's doing that now because that's just where they're at, I guess. I'm very much looking forward to the overthrow of the Australian government. I mean, it's them and China. It's like I let the regime fall. Honestly, if this was a video game and I could just respawn, I'd be an arms dealer in Australia.
Yeah. Facts. The
Sounds fun anyway.
I would say the same. I'd say the same about Cuba and North Korea, but I feel like those
Right.
are already too far gone. I feel like
North Korea
and
especially.
China's probably too far gone as well, honestly. But Australia, I don't know. I mean, they're still technically capitalist over there. I guess there's still some hope.
There are people
I
there
really
who are
hope.
pissed. There's riots in
Yeah,
Melbourne.
fuck.
There's riots actually all over the West. Germany is starting to look like this too. There's a province in Germany that
Yeah.
issued a vaccine mandate. Like this is getting bad. And people in the United States are absolutely looking across the seas to our tyrant friends across the pond saying, let's have some of that.
Yeah.
On my life you'll have it.
That's basically my main thoughts on the issue. I would say, basically, I think it's very easy to slip into that authoritarian mindset of, well, if we just do this, then the pandemic will be over in a month.
Yeah.
If we just do this, you know, we can get back to normal life. And it's like, but at what cost? That's the question I always ask: at what cost? Is it worth making children wear masks at school, so that we can quote unquote get back to normal faster? Is it worth vaccinating an entire public against their will, so we can get back to normal within the next month? Is that worth it? I would argue no. A lot
No.
of people in the US, frustratingly and scarily, are saying yes. And it's leaning more and more towards that Australian authoritarianism that I've been talking about. And it's just kind of scary that we're even kind of considering this kind of things.
Yeah.
But yeah. So was there any like main points you hit that you wanted my opinion on, like Comirnaty or um, any specific guidances? Because I didn't get to read over all
I
those
think
links you
we
sent me.
I think we
So
covered it
just sent
pretty
them.
well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the only other thing is that the Comirnaty vaccine is FDA approved but not available in the United States yet.
Yeah,
Um,
that one's strange to me. I admit I still need to do a little reading on that one. I imagine you covered it pretty well because you've been the main one researching that.
there's a crazy thing I actually realized in my
Hit me.
researching it in the approval letter that the FDA issued for the Comirnaty vaccine. A condition of the approval is that they conduct studies, some of which will not end until 2026.
Hmm.
And that's actually the myocarditis one. The FDA has ordered Pfizer and BioNTech as a condition of this approval that they have to study long term, essentially the long term potential consequences of myocarditis cases for 5 years. And that report is due in 2027, May of 2027. That's one of my primary concerns about this vaccine because that's one that's been universally acknowledged. to be a legitimate
Hmm.
risk, and especially in young people and especially in young men. So I'd like to see those numbers, but we're going to be waiting for a minute.
I think another thing that's crazy to me is how fast the conversation moved away from Moderna and what was the other one? Johnson and Johnson.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a lick about them in like 3 months. You know, are they still trying to get approved? You know, like what's going on there? The FDA is not really talking about it from what I've seen.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
question. I don't know.
I don't know. The main issue I have at this point with people that are really, really, really pro-vaccine. I don't have an issue with people that have taken the vaccine and encourage others to do so or whatever. You do you, consult with your doctor, whatever. I do take an issue with people like that, support the mandate and stuff like that, which is a step too far, in my opinion. Um, but one of the crazy things to me, and I've mentioned this to you several times, but it's the fact that no one seems to want to talk about alternative methods. So even like the
Right.
Moderna and the Johnson and Johnson vaccines, like why aren't we talking about those anymore? If there happens to be problems with the Pfizer vaccine, it seems like there already are, but even if we disregard those and say maybe there's future problems because they apparently have to test it until 2026, so who knows what will come up. Um, if there are problems with Pfizer, we need a backup plan. You know, we need Moderna, we need Johnson and Johnson, maybe a different vaccine altogether. Maybe we need um, someone looking into ivermectin, because that apparently showed some promise. But the issue with all of this is that no one seems to want to do that. Politicians have basically made a church of COVID. You have to
Right.
like worship the Pfizer vaccine with all your might. You're not allowed to talk about anything else because that's anti-science, as if science is some established rule set or rule book that is just set in stone for all of eternity. It's like the Ten Commandments just written
Right.
down
Right.
on
Yeah, I was
like
just
a
gonna
slab
say.
of
I
stone.
was just gonna say that.
But it's like that's not what science is. Science is evolving constantly. There used to be a time where we thought the sun revolved around the earth. And it's like, no, that was dumb. We were stupid. You could say that was kind of like the church kind of influencing that apparently. I forget
It
my
really
history
is.
there.
It really is the.
Um,
It is religious at this point. It's not at all exaggeration to say that it is elevated, at least in many of the people who are especially fervent, that it's a religious thing. This is a religion that has rites, rites, rights. It has alms you must pay. It has high priests. It has a whole code of conduct. I mean,
yeah.
it's 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 actually absurd. And oddly enough, if you want to be exempt from these vaccine mandates, a valid reason is religious reasons. And it's like, oh, you don't subscribe to our religion. I see. Seriously, it's
Yeah, it's a
it's it's
religion
a
in everything but name.
yeah, right. And then these people who you have merchandise with Fauci's name and likeness all over them, and who are like
That's the
foaming at
shit
the
that gets me the most.
mouth
And
to condemn heretics and want inquisitions to find them and all the rest of it. These people have the gall to tell you that they're not religious. And it's like, right. You have no idea what religion means if you think you're not religious.
yeah, I mean, takes me back to the that Reddit situation a month or two ago where they basically a bunch of random ass subreddits banded together to get a handful banned because they were anti-vaccine. Some
Right.
communities were more anti-vax in nature, and the difference between the two being one is like anti-vax people that believe that vaccines cause autism or what have you, so insane people. And then there's normal people like us who have no problem with the flu vaccine, for instance, but want a little more vetting of the COVID vaccine and a little more research done into it. Um, And so basically, there's like a situation on Reddit where those, and you know about this, but
Mm-hmm.
communities that were kind of pushing that kind of rhetoric were um, pressured by other communities, like, the most random ones, because moderators just kind of like swung their fists around, because the people will moderate like 5 different subreddits, and so they'll get their 5 different subreddits that aren't related at all. So you got like r/pics, and then you get like a porn subreddit, and then like a fucking r/games, r/Steam, and then r/California, and you get all 5 of those to message like the Reddit admins or whatever and say, hey, we don't like this one community. Can you take it down? It's like, okay, what the fuck does r/pics have to do with coronavirus
Right.
conspirators or whatever? But yeah, it's a religion to these people. They
It's an
they
inquisition.
you
It's
know
exactly what it is.
that was an inquisition for real.
There
Just
is
banding together to get
absolutely no difference between the Spanish Inquisition and that, except for language
and violence.
and violence. But I'm not entirely confident
We'll,
that, given
we'll
the
get there.
opportunity, yeah, right. Like, we give it a minute.
You see what's happening in Australia. We'll get
Yeah,
there.
right.
We'll get
The
there
year is
eventually.
young.
Well, I want to say young. We're in October. October 15th. We're closing now. Get the Christmas, Halloween, but
We're going to talk about
oh
Christmas soon.
yeah, Christmas. Yeah, Fauci's saying too soon to tell whether we can get together for Christmas. He said the same thing last year
Yeah,
too.
right. It's like they just
Bitch,
recorded
I'm
all
getting
their
together
shit
for
from last
Christmas.
year and just hit play, rewind, play. Just play the
Mm,
same shit over again. Fuck you, Tony Fauci. Honestly.
Tony Fauci.
Fucking
He's gonna
Tony the
sound like he's a
Tiger
member
looking
of the
ass
fucking
motherfucker.
mafia. Tony Fauci.
Dude,
Anyways, yeah, so it's basically a religion at this point. You have people like Reddit communities basically forming inquisitions against other people. Um, People on Twitter trying to get other people banned, like
oh,
the
don't even
Trumps of the
start with Twitter.
world, and Facebook as well, trying to get Facebook to moderate. The media is trying to get Facebook to moderate these groups and shit like that. So it's
Right.
it's just condemning heretics basically. That's what our status quo is. So
Well,
basically my thoughts.
I think we covered it very well.
I do too. No doubt there'll be more information to come later on,
Certainly.
because this is an ever evolving space, unlike what they have you to believe about the science.
Facts.
They want to
Facts.
believe the science is set in stone.
All right.
But
Well,
unlike that, this is
we
ever evolving.
we will be back soon with another episode on whatever the hell is going on next. God only
It'll
knows.
be spicy.
Well,
God save us.
it's going to please, Lord. The world
All
hated
right.
him before it hated us. And
They
that's all we
hated
got.
Jesus, for he spoke the truth.
Amen. All right. We'll catch y'all later. Thanks for listening.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
This has been Babel Royale.